Let's talk about just the concept of God for a second, because it's very important and things can get very confusing. There is a trend right now going on, and particularly in certain strains of American Protestantism, of what's called theistic personalism. It's the idea that the God of classical theism, with his radical simplicity, totality, singularity, immutability, all these features, is not understandable, and therefore God is much more just like a very special kind of entity, an entity not unlike other entities, but just in maximal degree. As far as I'm concerned, believing in this, you might as well worship Zeus, and not even in a sophisticated way. I mean, just literally just worship the Zeus with a thunderbolt in the sky. This is not what God is. To even get a glimpse of what we're talking about, one has to start to understand the depth of if you want, the weirdness of God or the uniqueness of God. The fact that God is the totality, the ultimate reflection of all things and all beings, the prime mover, all these aspects, but at the same time is perfectly, utterly simple. Now, you can't understand it in the sense of being able to comprehend it. It's the one thing you can't ever really comprehend. And then, in the Paradiso, as you get closer and closer to God, you still never fully understand God's ways and God's own being, what God is like to God's own self. It's beyond. And so it's very important to go back to traditional classical ideas of monotheism. The prime mover, the immaterial source of all reality and material reality. Immaterial because material, conceptually, to think of material is to think of the thing that takes form. Therefore, it has to be in one form or the other. But God is completely determinate in himself, and therefore does not contain the possibility of being another form. Therefore, he cannot be material. So, there is a sense that the New Age starts to actually embrace the traditional idea by calling it source. You see that a lot in New Age thinking, the source, connect to source. And I have some sympathy with the desire to call it source, because that does get the sense that it's out there, singular, abstract, and generating all of reality. The problem with calling it source is a couple things. One, it divorces God from his archetypal reality, which is true, which is kind of a Jungian thing, kind of the idea that, yes, God is perfectly simple in all these things, but he also contains within himself his own archetypal vision of himself, the God, the radical God of the Sistine Chapel, that's somehow contained within God's own essence. And also the idea of calling it source is just a little wishy-washy. It denies God's personal connection to every moment of actual existence. No, I think that calling it God is the proper idea. God, the Trinity, is the best way to both capture the weirdness of God, the uniqueness, the theological subtlety of God, and at the same time embracing his immediacy and his personal aspect, and the dimension of revelation, which is something the New Age doesn't like either, or really participate in. God is the kind of entity, singular kind of entity, which you should expect a revelation from to guide you along the way, to give you a sense of what story you are in, and that's what the incarnation is all about. And the fact that Jesus was a man and was God, fully God, but certainly he wasn't the God of necessarily the Aristotelian prime mover. He revealed part of the structure of how God functions by being the full Son of God, generating reality in his consciousness, and yet being not obviously the totality of all things. Jesus was a man, fully God. It is a mystery. You're not going to get it in the sense of fully comprehending it. But you have to live in that mystery. You have to live in the knowledge that this is what God has revealed about his own essence and structure and being. And if you want to call it source, okay, but I think the term God, with its even the sound of it, the G and the D, the formalness, the strength of it, God, one should have a sense of awesomeness when contemplating the deity, that I think the term God does capture. And again, it's not the God of theistic personalism. It is the God of classical monotheism, all-knowing, all-present, all-good. And God, he doesn't hear your prayers in the sense of going from one state to the other where he could hear your prayer and then not hear your prayer, or change his mind about something. God is one singular total state of being that is incomprehensible, who understands everything a priori. And it helps us to personalize God, to think of him in a way of like, can he hear my prayer? Can he do this for me? Can he do that for me? But really, if you want to get it, you have to move beyond that and realize that it's always present, constant, total, radical, weird, epic, It's a theological totality that we're talking about. And only by starting to contemplate that will you have the humility to then worship God and love God. And it's very hard to love Source. And I think it's very hard to love the theistic personalism God, because he happens to be good, but couldn't he be a jerk? If he's just another certain kind of entity, like a lot of the gods were jerks, in Greek mythology or whatever. No. God is worth worshiping because of his singular totality, because he is the God of classical monotheism behind your eyes, and has revealed himself in the person of Jesus. No one has ever seen God, says the Bible, but Jesus has made us known to him. How mysterious.